The night he left me was so quiet that even my heartbeat sounded like something breaking. And yet, that same night, without knowing it, my life was already turning towards someone who would show me what love was supposed to feel like. My name is Vernon, and this story begins on a rain-soaked Thursday at the edge of a city that never stopped moving, even when I wanted everything to freeze. I had been standing outside the apartment I shared with Drew, the man I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. The rain kept running into my eyes, and I told myself it was just water, not tears. I had practiced being strong for so long that real crying felt like a language I had forgotten how to speak. Inside, his words still echoed. They were sharp, fast, and rehearsed in that cold way people speak when they want to hurt you, but also want to convince themselves they do not care. I cannot do this anymore. I cannot love someone who looks like a reminder of pain. I cannot look at your scars and pretend everything is fine. Scars. He meant mine. I had them on my arms, on my shoulders, on my ribs, on places I never showed anyone. Some came from childhood accidents, some from choices I regretted, some from things I never talked about. They were part of me, like the shape of my hands or the color of my eyes. I did not worship them, but I did not hate them either. They were just the quiet history of my survival. But Drew hated them. He used to say he loved me anyway, but that word anyway held more weight than I ever wanted to admit. Loving someone in spite of something felt different from loving someone with something. When he finally said out loud that he wished I looked different, I felt something inside me collapse. I walked away from that apartment without looking back. The rain swallowed me whole. If I had known that this heartbreak would place Malcolm on my path, I would have still hated the pain, but I might have breathed easier knowing the story was not going to end there. I worked as an evening shift supervisor at a local community center, the kind of place where the floors always smelled faintly of old basketballs and cleaning spray. I liked the work. It kept me busy. It distracted me from myself. The night after the breakup, I showed up early, hoping that being surrounded by noise would drown out the quiet inside my own head. Kids ran down the halls, laughter bouncing off the walls. The older teens gathered in groups around the gym doors, arguing about who got the court next. The sound of sneakers squeaking against the floor felt like the heartbeat the world lent me when mine felt too heavy. I was signing a form at the reception desk when I heard a voice I did not recognize. "You are Vernon, right?" His tone was bright, warm, as if he had been waiting to meet me. When I looked up, I saw him. Malcolm. He leaned casually against the desk, hands in the pockets of his windbreaker. His smile was open in a way that made people trust him. He had a confident, easy presence, like he was someone who knew how to read a room and always chose gentleness first. "Yeah, that is me. Do you need help with something?" I asked. He lifted a folded paper from his pocket. "I just transferred to the volunteer program. They told me you are the one in charge of orientation." "Right." I took the paper from him. "And you are Malcolm?" He grinned. "So you have already heard of me. That explains the red carpet treatment." I shook my head. "You were standing on a rubber mat." "Still counts, if you ask me." It was impossible not to smile a little. Something about him made the air feel lighter. Orientation took about 40 minutes. I walked him through the center, explained donation procedures, emergency exits, gym policies, after-school tutoring schedules. He listened carefully, nodded often, and asked thoughtful questions. He carried an easy energy that made silence feel comfortable rather than awkward. When we finished, he leaned on the railing near the indoor track and pointed toward the busy floor below. "You work here every evening?" "Most evenings, yeah." He studied me for a moment. "You look like someone who does not mind being busy, someone who likes keeping their head occupied." That observation hit closer than I expected. I looked away. "What makes you say that?" I asked. He shrugged lightly. "People who keep moving are usually running from something." I felt my breath catch. For a second, even the sounds of the building dimmed. It was strange how quickly he had read something I had spent years hiding. Before I could respond, he added, "I do not mean that in a bad way. Just means you are human. And I get it. I run too." "What do you run from?" I asked. He smiled with only half his mouth. Maybe I will tell you someday. There was no pressure in his voice, just the offer of being understood. The rest of the week was a blur. I went through the motions of work, but every night I found myself thinking about Malcolm. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in a curious one. He carried himself like someone who had weathered storms, but not in a bitter way. More like he had learned how to dance around the lightning. He started showing up early for his shifts. Sometimes he helped me move equipment. Sometimes he followed me around asking ridiculous questions about trivial things. Sometimes he simply existed beside me in a kind of peaceful silence. One evening, we ended up restocking the storage room together. The air smelled like dust and old cardboard, and the single flickering light overhead made the moment feel strangely intimate. "So, Vernon," he said as he lifted a box of jerseys onto a shelf, "what is your story?" "Everyone has a story," I said, sliding another box into place. "Yeah, but your eyes say yours is worth hearing." I laughed under my breath. That is a weird thing to say. Maybe, but true. I looked at my hands. The scars on my forearms caught the dim light. I waited for that familiar flicker of discomfort in someone else's eyes, the one that Drew never bothered to hide. But Malcolm did not stare. He just kept working, kept talking, kept treating me like a person and not a problem. It felt strange and good. I decided to change the subject. "What about you? What brings someone like you to this place?" "Someone like me," he said with a playful tone. "That sounds flattering. Or suspicious." I meant it as a compliment. "Good, because I am extremely sensitive and would have taken it personally." He said it so seriously that I almost believed him, until his smile broke through and the room felt warmer again. "But to answer your question," he added, "I came here because I wanted to do something that mattered, something that made people feel less alone." I raised an eyebrow. That is a pretty noble reason. Noble is not the word. Maybe necessary. Why necessary? He hesitated. "Just trust me on that." He looked like he wanted to say more, but he did not, and I did not push. Some stories take time. Days passed, then a week, then two. Malcolm became a steady presence in my routine. He made ordinary moments feel lighter. He noticed things. He laughed easily. He listened sincerely. And in his company, I realized something I had not felt in a long time. I was not tired of being alive. It happened on a quiet Monday night. The center had mostly emptied, and I was wiping down the counters when Malcolm appeared beside me with 2 cans of iced tea in his hands. "Break time," he said, handing me one. I accepted it. We sat on the floor against the wall, legs stretched out, shoulders barely touching. The air felt comfortable in a way that made the rest of the world feel unnecessary. He cracked open his can and took a long drink. Then he looked at me. "So, want to tell me why you have been walking around like your heart is carrying 400 pounds? I froze. He did not ask with judgment. There was no pressure, just quiet concern. I exhaled slowly. My boyfriend left me. "I know," he said softly. My head snapped toward him. "You know." He shrugged. "People talk. And I have eyes." A flush crept up my neck. He left because of my scars. I expected shock, or pity, or confusion. Instead, Malcolm asked one simple question. "Do your scars make you any less worthy of love?" I swallowed. "No." "Then why are you letting someone convince you otherwise?" I stared at my hands. The iced tea can felt cold against my skin. "I do not know." He gently nudged my shoulder. "Then figure it out. Not for him. For you." Silence settled between us, but it was not empty. It was full of something unnamed. For the first time since the breakup, I felt steady. That night, when we locked up the center, Malcolm walked beside me to the parking lot. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of distant rain. Streetlights reflected in small puddles along the pavement. As we reached my car, he stopped, then turned slightly toward me. "Vernon," he said quietly. "Yeah, you are stronger than you think. I hope you realize that soon." The way he said it did something to me, shifted something inside me, tugged at something I had kept locked behind ribs, and silence. He stepped back and gave me a small smile. See you tomorrow. And then he left. I stood beside my car long after he disappeared into the night. Something was changing, something I could not name but could feel. I told myself it was nothing, just kindness, just friendship. But deep down, I knew it was more. The following week, everything that had been quietly building finally reached a moment I would never forget. It was late. The center was nearly empty. I was sorting lost and found items when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Before I turned, Malcolm's voice reached me, breathless and edged with panic. Vernon, wait. I spun around. His eyes were tense, as if he had run straight from somewhere. His hair was wind-messed. His hands trembled. What happened? I asked. I messed up, he said, and you are probably going to hate me. My chest tightened. Tell me. He lifted a small notebook. My notebook. I left it in the office earlier that day without noticing. I had filled its pages with pieces of myself. Thoughts, memories, fragments of pain I never spoke out loud. I had no idea he had even seen it. I am sorry, he said. I did not mean to. It fell open when I moved it. And I read a page. Maybe two. I took a slow breath. What did you read? He swallowed. Enough to know you have been carrying things alone for too long. Silence stretched between us. I should not have looked, he said. I crossed a line. My voice was quiet. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to know something. He took a step closer, then another. I did not feel fear, just a strange, rising warmth. Vernon, he said, his voice steady now, I do not care about your scars. I do not care about what hurt you. I only care about who you are now, and who you are becoming. My throat tightened. He continued, and I need you to hear this. Someone rejecting you does not mean you are unlovable. It only means they did not know how to love the right way. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Not from shock. From recognition. From hope. Malcolm stepped close enough that I could feel his breath. You deserve someone who sees every part of you and stays, he said, not someone who looks at your wounds and walks away. My breath caught. Malcolm. He held my gaze with something fierce and tender all at once. Let me be that person. The room felt impossibly still. My heartbeat was loud enough to drown out everything else. My hands shook, not from fear, from the weight of being seen so completely. I had spent so long believing love was something fragile, something conditional, something that demanded perfection or silence. But in that moment, with Malcolm standing in front of me, everything I believed about love began to change. And it was only the beginning. Malcolm did not touch me. He did not rush the moment or try to turn it into something it was not. He simply stood there, steady and patient, letting me decide what came next. That patience felt like something sacred, something I had not known I needed until it was offered to me. I took a slow breath. I could still hear the rain outside, soft against the windows. It sounded like the world whispering that it was okay to choose myself for once. I looked at him, really looked at him, and said quietly, I am scared. He nodded once. I know. You do not know all of it. His expression softened. Then tell me. Or tell me later. Or tell me never. Whatever you choose, I am not going anywhere. Words like that should not have felt real. But they did. Maybe because he said them without expecting anything in return. I lowered my gaze, staring at the faint marks on my arms. Some scars looked newer, some older, but they all carried stories I had never shared fully. I had spent so many years pretending they were invisible that the idea of someone not only seeing them, but wanting to stay regardless felt unreal. I do not understand why you care so much, I whispered. Malcolm's voice was calm, steady. Because I know what it feels like to look in the mirror and see a version of yourself that the world tries to shame you for. Because I have scars too. Maybe not the same kind, but scars all the same. And because caring does not require permission. The last sentence hit me like a slow, gentle truth. Caring does not require permission. I closed my eyes for a moment. The weight in my chest did not vanish, but it shifted, like something cramped finally having room to breathe. When I opened them again, Malcolm was still there, still watching me with the same warm, unwavering gaze. I am not ready, I admitted. Not for anything big. Not yet. Malcolm nodded. I never asked you to be. I only asked you to let me stay. And somehow, despite the fear, despite the ache still lingering in the background of my mind, I found myself whispering, okay. A quiet smile formed on his lips. Then we will start from here. He stepped back, giving me space, giving me air, giving me room to understand myself again. And in that moment, I realized something I had never understood before. Real love does not rush. It does not demand. It waits. It listens. It makes room. We locked up the center and walked outside. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, turning the parking lot lights into soft halos. Malcolm shoved his hands into his pockets and walked beside me, not too close, not too far, just enough. So, he said lightly, trying to break the heaviness with his usual charm, should we celebrate this moment with dinner, or should we pretend we are too emotionally mature for late-night snacks? A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. It felt foreign but good. Definitely dinner. He grinned. Good. Because I am starving and you look like you have not eaten anything besides anxiety for the past week. He was not wrong. We ended up at a small diner 2 blocks away, the kind with neon signs and cracked vinyl booths. The waitress recognized Malcolm immediately with a wave. The usual, he called out. The usual, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. He leaned toward me. I come here after my shifts sometimes. Helps me unwind. And what is the usual, I asked. You will see. We slid into a booth. The lights inside were dim, making the whole place feel like a refuge for people who were learning how to put themselves back together. The waitress brought out 2 plates without asking. A grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup for him. And for me, a plate of garlic butter fries and a turkey melt. How did she know what I wanted, I asked, surprised. Malcolm smiled. She did not. But you look like someone who needs something that reminds them the world is not all sharp edges and broken glass. I stared at him. That is oddly accurate. I am gifted, he said. Also, I saw you eyeing someone else's fries when we came in. Do not think I did not notice. I rolled my eyes, but I could not deny the small warmth his attention sparked inside me. We ate slowly. Malcolm talked about small, easy things, funny stories about the kids at the center, the time he tripped over a jump rope in front of an entire class, the time he accidentally set off the alarm in the storage room because he thought the sensor was a light switch. His stories made me laugh, made the knot in my chest loosen a little at a time. But he did not push deeper. He let the night be soft. When the meal was done, I leaned back in the booth, feeling fuller than I had in days. Thanks, I said quietly. For the food, he asked. For everything. He gave me a look that was both gentle and amused. Vernon, you do not have to thank me for giving a damn. That is not a favor. That is just what care looks like. I lowered my eyes. I am still getting used to that. He nodded. Then we will take it slow. The drive home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Malcolm walked me to my door and stood there with his hands in his pockets, and that half smile he always seemed to carry. See you tomorrow, he said. I nodded. Tomorrow. When he left, I leaned against the door and let out a breath I had been holding for too long. Something inside me felt different. Not healed, not fixed, just beginning. And beginnings were enough. The next week passed differently. I found myself waking up with a little less dread. I caught myself smiling more, sometimes for no reason other than the memory of Malcolm's warmth. He never crossed boundaries. He never pushed. He simply stayed close, like a steady heartbeat beside mine. One night, after a particularly long day, we ended up sorting through donated sports equipment together. Boxes were stacked everywhere, the air thick with the smell of rubber and dust. Malcolm was sitting on the floor surrounded by deflated basketballs when he suddenly looked up with a strange expression. "Did Drew ever apologize?" he asked. The question came out of nowhere, and it felt like someone had pulled back a curtain I had kept carefully closed. "No," I said. "He never did." Malcolm nodded slowly. "And do you still want him to?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. I had wanted an apology for so long. But now, with Malcolm here, with the slow rebuilding of my sense of self, something had shifted. "No," I answered. "I do not." "Why not?" he asked. "Because I do not need closure from someone who never knew how to love me in the first place. Because wanting him to apologize meant I was still holding on. And I do not think I am holding on anymore." Malcolm gave me a proud smile. "Good. That means you are growing." I snorted softly. "You sound like a therapist." "Maybe I should start charging you." I threw a deflated soccer ball at him. He caught it with a laugh. Working beside him felt easy, natural, safe. And while my heart still carried bruises, the sharp edges had begun to dull. I no longer felt like I was walking around with open wounds. One evening, Malcolm asked if I wanted to take a walk after closing. I agreed. We ended up by the river that cut through the city, the water catching the moonlight like scattered silver. The air was cool, and the path was quiet except for the rustle of leaves. Malcolm shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "You know, when I first met you, I could tell right away that you were hurting." "That obvious?" I asked, a little embarrassed. "Not obvious. Just familiar." I looked at him. "What were you hurting from?" He hesitated. Then he took a slow breath. "I used to be with someone, too. We were together for 2 years. He made me feel like I was too much. Too emotional. Too loud. Too hopeful. He said people like me were unrealistic, that we expected too much from the world. One day he told me I was exhausting, that he needed someone easier to love." The words stung me more than I expected. Malcolm stared at the water. I spent months trying to shrink myself, trying to become smaller, quieter, less alive. Then one day I realized something. He did not want me. He wanted a version of me that did not exist. And I do not ever want to disappear just to be loved. His voice wavered for the first time since I had known him. I stepped closer without thinking. Malcolm looked at me, and in that moment, our pain felt like two different paths leading to the same place. I said softly, "You are not too much. You are exactly enough." He smiled a little. "And you are not too broken. You are just still healing." We stood there for a long moment, the night air wrapping around us like something gentle. Then Malcolm said quietly, "I am glad we met." "Me too." He looked at me as if trying to memorize something. Then he whispered, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you feel anything for me, or is everything still too raw?" The question hit me like a slow, warm tide. I swallowed. "I feel something. I do not know what to call it yet, but it is there." Malcolm's shoulders relaxed, as if he had been holding his breath. "That is enough," he said. We continued walking, and each step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had forgotten existed. A week later, everything shifted again. It happened on a Friday evening. I was cleaning up after a busy shift when Drew walked into the center. My entire body went still. He looked the same, clean-cut, composed, polished, but his eyes carried something I could not quite place. "Vernon," he said softly. I froze. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk." I did not know what to say. Before I could respond, Malcolm appeared behind me, stopping just close enough to show he was there if I needed him. Drew glanced at him, then at me. "Can we speak alone?" I hesitated. Malcolm kept his expression calm, but his eyes asked me one quiet question. "Are you okay?" I nodded slightly. Then I turned to Drew. "Fine. 5 minutes." We stepped into an empty hallway. Drew leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You look different," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Different how? Stronger, maybe. Or colder. I cannot tell." I did not respond. He sighed. I came because I think I made a mistake. My chest tightened slightly, not from longing, but from the familiar sting of old wounds. A mistake, I asked. I should not have left. I should not have said what I said. I was overwhelmed. I took it out on you, and I regret it. I watched him carefully. His voice was soft, his posture relaxed, but something felt off, like he was more concerned with his guilt than with my healing. Why now? I asked. Because I miss you. I shook my head. Drew, you do not miss me. You miss the comfort of the version of me you were used to. He blinked. That is not true. Isn't it? I asked. You wanted someone easier, someone unscarred, someone who did not carry pain you did not want to deal with. And now that I am not there to fill that space, you are lonely. He flinched slightly. I care about you. Maybe you do, but you did not love me enough to stay. Silence fell between us. Then he said quietly, we were good together. We were familiar, I corrected. That is not the same. Drew's eyes hardened a little. So that is it, you meet someone new, and suddenly what we had means nothing. I felt the shift in his tone, and I realized something with perfect clarity. I was done apologizing for existing. No, I said. What we had meant something, but it ended, and I am not going back to someone who made me feel ashamed of my own skin. Drew's jaw tightened. So that is it. That is it, I said. I hope you find what you need, but it is not me anymore. When I walked back into the main room, Malcolm was waiting. He did not ask what happened. He just looked at me with quiet worry. I exhaled. It is over. His voice was soft. Are you okay? I nodded. For the first time. Yes, I am. Malcolm smiled slowly. Good. I am proud of you. And walking toward him felt like walking toward the future instead of the past. The days that followed felt different in a way I couldn't fully describe. Something inside me had finally settled, like dust after a long storm. I no longer woke up with that familiar ache in my chest, the one that used to remind me of everything I had lost. Instead, I woke up wondering what new piece of my life I might reclaim. Malcolm remained steady, as if he instinctively knew the exact distance I needed between space and closeness. Some days we talked for hours. Some days we simply worked side by side in comfortable silence. And every day, I felt myself shifting in ways I hadn't expected. One evening, after most of the volunteers had gone home, Malcolm and I found ourselves alone in the gym. The overhead lights were dimmed except for a row near the bleachers. The air was warm and still, carrying the faint smell of polished wood. Malcolm sat on the court, leaning back on his hands. His expression was thoughtful, almost hesitant. So, he began, we have been orbiting around this thing for a while. I sank down beside him. What thing? Us, he said simply. My stomach tightened, not with fear, with awareness. He continued, I meant what I said that night. I do not care about the scars or the past or the pieces you are still figuring out. I care about you, but I also know you needed time and space and strength, and I wanted to wait until you had all of that before I asked you anything real. The honesty in his voice was like stepping into sunlight after too long in the dark. I looked at him. You think I am ready now? He shrugged, though the gesture carried a gentle kind of hope. I think you know whether you are. I took a slow breath, letting the quiet settle around us. The sound of a distant ball bouncing in another room echoed faintly, then faded. I thought about the boy I had been weeks ago, carrying heartbreak like a weight chained to my ribs. I thought about the version of myself who feared being seen, who believed love was something that had to be earned by hiding the messy parts. And then I thought about now. This moment. This man sitting beside me. This new beginning. I turned to him, my voice steady. I am ready. Something in his expression softened, like he had been holding on to that hope for longer than he wanted to admit. Then he asked, with quiet vulnerability, can I be with you not in a rushed way, not in a perfect way, just in a real way? My chest felt warm, grounded, full. Yes. The word felt like the final key turning in a long locked door. Malcolm exhaled in relief, then laughed softly. I was pretty sure you were going to say no, and I was prepared to pretend I was completely fine with it. I nudged him with my shoulder. You are terrible at pretending. He leaned closer, voice low. I guess that is good. You deserve someone honest. And with that, he gently reached for my hand. He moved slowly, almost asking permission with nothing more than his eyes. I let my fingers curl around his. His hand was warm, steady, grounding. Nothing dramatic happened. No fireworks. No sudden rush of cinematic magic. Just a quiet truth settling between us. It was enough. We stayed like that for a long time, sitting on the court floor with our hands intertwined. The world outside the gym faded, leaving only the soft hum of overhead lights and the warmth of his presence beside mine. After a while, Malcolm asked quietly, "What do you want now?" I considered the question. Not just what I want from him, but what I want from myself, from my life, from the future I had once been afraid to imagine. I want to stop surviving and start living, I said. I want to stop seeing myself as someone to be tolerated. I want to be with someone who chooses me without hesitation, and I want to choose back. Malcolm squeezed my hand. Then let us choose each other. Not perfectly, not painlessly, just honestly. I nodded. That is all I ever wanted. He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of something I had almost forgotten. Hope. When he walked me home that night, he did not kiss me. He did not try to turn the moment into something dramatic or cliché. Instead, he hugged me gently, his arms strong and reassuring around me, and whispered against my shoulder, "I am here, no matter what." The simplicity of that promise felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. The weeks that followed bloomed slowly, like a tree unfurling its leaves after winter. Malcolm and I eased into each other's lives with a quiet naturalness. We learned each other's rhythms, fears, joys. We spent afternoons volunteering together, evenings sharing small meals, late nights talking about the versions of ourselves we rarely showed the world. Sometimes, he would trace the faint scars on my forearms with gentle fingertips, not to pity them, but to acknowledge them, to acknowledge me. And every time he did, I felt something inside me stitch itself back together. One early morning, we sat on the steps of the community center watching the sunrise bleed colors across the sky. Malcolm leaned his head on my shoulder, comfortable and warm. "Do you ever regret what happened with Drew?" he asked softly. I thought about it, really thought about it. Once, the answer would have been yes. But now, no, I said, because if he had stayed, I would never have learned what real love actually looks like. Malcolm's voice was warm with emotion. "And what does real love look like to you?" I looked at him, the early light casting soft gold across his face. "Real love looks like staying. Like listening. Like choosing each other even on the hard days. Like understanding that scars are not flaws, but history. Like healing together instead of alone." He smiled, eyes softening with something deep. "Then real love is exactly what I want with you." My heart tightened in the best way. I whispered, "Me too." He kissed me then. Not with urgency. Not with hunger. But with the tenderness of someone who understood the weight of the moment. The kiss was soft, steady, grounding. A promise rather than a demand. A beginning rather than an answer. And as the sun rose fully over the city, painting the world in warmth, I realized that the story of my scars did not end with pain or rejection. It ended here. With someone who saw every piece of me and chose to stay. With someone who taught me love was never about being perfect. It was about being real. And for the first time in my life, I felt entirely, undeniably loved.